I went to Pax East this year to get a look at some of the upcoming games that I really was very interested in. Some of the games that I'm really a little bit uncertain of, like Crimson Desert, for example, an RPG, and a beautiful looking RPG that I had some questions about. What I didn't expect to come away with was excitement for a game like Borderlands 4. I also wanted to investigate an upcoming zombie-like game that's in a little bit of a different setting. A game where you can trip zombies with like barrels and shit, all while screaming in a British accent. A really bad one, like, "Get the fuck away, you zombie." Not like that. Oh, you zombie fuck. I'm half British. It's so bad. I blame the cat. My primary purpose at PAX was simple. I wanted to test out Crimson Desert, the upcoming gorgeous looking RPG from Pearl Abyss, makers of the Black Desert MMO, and I did so in part because I had some concerns about the game. Well, I got to play, but only for about 15 minutes. We got a 15-minute video tutorial and explainer about the game, and then we set off on our own to try out essentially boss fights, with only the slightest bit of introduction. I got my absolute ass kicked multiple times. That didn't dissuade me from the game, but it was essentially 15 minutes of me getting thrown everywhere and hitting walls and shit, and just realizing that I'm awful. And there was like people watching me, like maybe tens of people. I don't think there were that many people, but in some ways doing this made sense. Pearl Abyss is known for primarily two things: combat and stunning visuals. Well, I guess also and really aggressive monetization at times, but that's for MMOs primarily. But this little preview tried to showcase both of those things. And my impressions can best be summed up as mixed, bearing in mind that 15 minutes is not long enough to get a feel for any game. But I had a similar first impression of Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 last year, and I came away a bit more impressed. To put it bluntly, none of my initial concerns were put to rest. What I played was one of the first boss fights, presumably one of the easiest boss fights. What followed, as I was saying, was me getting thrown into the fire and realizing I had no idea how the controls of the game actually worked. Now, part of that is just because I have ADHD and I struggled to pay attention in the video because it was kind of boring. But also because it just like you just get thrown right into a boss fight, which is generally not how you play a game unless it's freaking Elden Ring. I probably used about 10 to 20% of my combat set, leaving me at a disadvantage, but two major things stood out, one good and one bad. First, the bad. Direct combat hits like slashes, fast and slow attacks, heavy and fast attacks felt about as bad as I have ever felt in an RPG that boasts action combat. There seemed to be absolutely zero recoil, zero connectivity, and the main way you knew you were being hit or you were hitting them was these little red or green glows on each target. It was very underwhelming. It was just bad. I don't know. Then again, it was a 15-minute little preview here, but it just felt off. And it's shocking because the good part is also tied to the physics feel of the game. The enemy I was fighting was a gigantic Viking who'd pick me up and throw me, smashing me against walls where I'd crumple and fall. The sound effects here and the physical feel of being hurled against the environment and seeing the recoil was deeply satisfying. It existed in opposition to the lack of good attack combat feel. It was like they were two different games. I don't know how else to describe it. Combat felt like a traditional action RPG combat otherwise. This is not Souls-like combat by any means. Health pools are large and you can heal relatively easily. I spent a lot of time just running around and healing after getting tossed into side things, and it's pretty easy to dodge attacks once you get the feel of it. Although again, I couldn't lock on, which made the camera views and camera angles really kind of frustrating to handle. So hopefully there is an ability to lock onto your enemy, and I just could not find it in the controls because of my own ineptitude. But beyond combat itself, the environment that we did get to see was gorgeous. The sound and visuals were as stunning as you might expect. Not just the environment I played, but some of the ones we saw just looked incredible. Looked beautiful, from waving grass to snowdrifts and falling trees. Falling trees that actually fall on you and do damage. There was one tree in this little demo that I did. One tree that fell. It hit me in the head. I don't think many people got hit by this tree. There's a lot of telegraphing. The branch starts to break, it falls very slowly, and yet somehow it still hit me. But I love that. I love that so much because it really shows it's a way to make the environment itself feel more than just set dressing. It's one of those things that I absolutely loved in Valheim, because when you chop down a tree, there's some danger in it. And I appreciated that the environment itself was having an impact here, much like the environment, the game level, felt a little bit like some of the fighting games when I was younger, where the boundary walls had physics to them. Maybe I just really liked getting tossed around. I don't know what that says about me. What this game didn't assuage is concerns over the story. Everything right down to the main character, Cliff McDuff, feels painfully generic. He looks generic. I don't know how else to put it. He just looks generic. A lot of the enemies just, I think it's when enemies and NPCs try to look too pretty, they seem to lack character. Maybe this is more of a me thing than anything else, but it's like when you have a teen show that's cast with all pretty people, it feels too unrealistic. And the story itself kind of feels like generic fantasy story. I hope I'm wrong. And again, this is from a 15-minute explainer video plus the things I've read about the story, so take all of this with a grain of salt. This could be one of the best stories out there, and we just haven't seen all of it yet. I'm just not getting the same feeling I do when I look at a game like Exodus or a game like Expedition 33 or Baldur's Gate 3 or KCD. There just doesn't seem to be the same kind of depth, at least not yet. I do want to just add here my concerns about how the enemy just kind of absorbed your attacks and didn't seem to have a reaction to your fast or heavy attacks may in part be because of that specific enemy and is not indicative of how the rest of the game plays. For example, a lot of this footage you're seeing with the goblins and stuff that we didn't get to play in the hands-on preview seems to have a little bit more recoil, has a lot more action happening when you hit the enemies, a lot more feedback, making it seem like perhaps it was more of a case of that gigantic boss just didn't actually show when they got hit by anything. The downside to that is you still have that lack of registering in moments when it's supposed to feel epic. So I hope that's more of a one-off and that's not how the rest of the game or the rest of the bosses feel. And again, this is all with due diligence because 30 total minutes, 15 minutes video, 15 minutes gameplay is not enough to make any kind of opinion on a game. This is just what I got to experience at PAX, and I wish that we'd gotten to experience more. I wish we'd been able to fight non-boss enemies. I wish we'd been able to explore more of the game and see a little bit more of the story, but this is what they showed us. I remain optimistic that the game will at least be good. I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous. There's no other way to put it. This game may be one of the most beautiful games releasing this year, but I still remain kind of mixed on my experience. Our next game though, well, it kind of caught me by surprise, and unfortunately, we didn't get to play it at PAX.
I freaking love it, and I'm here right now with you guys. We're here together. Amazing. And I get to talk about Borderlands 4.
I am generally not the target demographic for Borderlands 4. I briefly played Borderlands in the past, but kind of quickly lost interest. Looter shooters have just never really been able to appeal to me. Even Remnant 2, which had an interesting story to it, caught my attention for a good long while, but even that eventually faded away. But the first panel I saw at PAX East was for Borderlands 4. The most surprising part of the panel was a fairly simple phrase that caught my attention immediately and had me sitting forward in my seat to hear more.
You know, the Timekeeper did get a hold of this place, and he's got his tamed center of the planet where he commands and controls everything. But out in the wilds, it's nuts. And also even in that area, it's not safe unless you are, you know, on the side of the Order. So for a Vault Hunter, it's just everything's possible. And this is the biggest, by far, universe that we've built, and it's seamless. There's no load times. Just you see something anywhere on the screen, a mile away, up in the sky, you will be able to get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The promise of a world being so open has me really excited to explore. They went further into describing why they ditched a minimap in favor of a compass, being in service of this open world design, as well as quality of life features designed around still keeping your friends together with direct travel to each other and level and difficulty syncing, as well as personal loot making for what sounds like compelling, less friction co-op experience that allows you to drop in and out whenever you want to play with your friends. So if one of your friends, I don't know, someone like vaguely like me is kind of shitty at games, they can play with you and you don't have to play on a lower difficulty. And you can still get the experience that you wanted while your friend also has a similar experience, but at their difficulty level. I'm really excited to see how this works out, how this kind of like almost like personal phasing and syncing works out while doing it all seamlessly. It's a kind of technology that I'm really interested in seeing for co-op games like this, co-op RPG type games like this. I really want to see more of. A lot of the panel actually focused on this idea of co-op with the founder of Gearbox actually imploring other games, other co-op games to kind of make their co-op better. He was very animated the whole panel, I'll just put it that way. And all of this is against a backstory of what sounds like a really compelling story about dismantling a planet's authoritarian controller, someone who is very upset that you're there. They also let out that there will be distinct loot from bosses, not just random loot pinatas, coming in part with a rework to their loot system to hopefully make it seem less overwhelming and come along slower. And as someone who gets easily overwhelmed with these loot vendor type games, that again made me more intrigued. The panel alone has convinced me to try this game out to see if it hits for me, and actually pulled a Larian and moved up their release date a few weeks to September 12th of 2025. I really want to see what Gearbox is cooking, and part of my interest comes from the genuine excitement I saw, not just from the founder, who's obviously excited about all of their games, but also from the head writer that was sitting on the panel as well, who seemed genuinely excited about the story that Borderlands 4 has to tell, and some of the unique beats that they're gonna have out there, and what you'll be able to explore, and how you'll be able to deal with consequences of your actions in the game. That enthusiasm was absolutely infectious in a good way, not the bad way that we all know about, but also a bad way that is key to our next game. God Save Birmingham. Lastly, I got to see a bit of hands-on preview for God Saves Birmingham. This is a bit outside the RPG realm, but promises to be an interesting and perhaps refreshing take on the zombie survival formula. Set in 14th century Birmingham, England, where you are one of the few survivors of a plague that has turned people into monsters, shambling corpses that want nothing more than to take a bite out of you. Perhaps with an afternoon tea. The game is still in its very early stages, and it kind of looked that way. Their goal is to have a sandbox version of the game out in first in early access, with a campaign to come later. When I initially saw the trailers for the game, I kind of wondered which way I'd go. Would it lean more towards survival, RPG, or horror? And what I saw, the game seems to be leaning more towards the horror genre. And what was shown was largely what I'd expect from like a AA version of a 14th century Resident Evil, running and hiding from zombies, pushing them off you, and using rudimentary looking combat to get rid of the undead, and those undead seemingly much stronger than you. even when you're men with a pitchfork. What stood out as an interesting feature though was physics-based movement. Zombies would trip and fall over obstacles, and you could block doors with them, moving things to protect yourself. I can see this in particular becoming a major selling point. Because we didn't see the campaign, it's harder to see how this will eventually play out when it's actually all the way released. And the campaign itself is at least 2 years away according to the Steam page, which pegs the EA release of their sandbox version about a year away, and the campaign a year or so beyond that. They're clear though that the elements will be very light story elements, so perhaps the comparison to Resident Evil was a bit aggressive, even saying it was AA. This may end up being just a straight up horror survival game where you last as long as you can and then start over. An open-ended sandbox experience where each experience is a little bit different because you die at different times. And this, I think, was perhaps the most disappointing part of all, and it left me longing for another game in this little subgenre of medieval zombies. My eyes are on another game that is long in development and sadly was not at PAX. Blight Survival. A medieval game where you enter a no man's land between warring kingdoms where the Blight has taken hold, and you and your kin, the Writhens, must eradicate the Blight. Now, because I'm a huge fan of Dragon Age, of course, when I think of Blight, I think of, well, Dragon Age, but it's interesting to think of what this could potentially do depending on how deep they go into story. It doesn't seem like they're gonna be going that much deeper, but it does seem at least like there is an established lore, an established reason for being, and an almost like Grey Warden-esque version of, well, you and your kin are gonna go here, or like Witchers going to take on those blight-ridden humans. And you can also, it's also gonna be a co-op game, whereas Road to Birmingham is a single player, shit your pants, and scream a lot solo game. The one with Blight Survival is a shit your pants and scream a lot with friends version of zombie survival with swords and stuff where you can murder instead of just running. Overall, my PAX experience was really, really interesting. It was my first time going to PAX and I had a lot of fun. And I look forward to going again in the future to see what kind of games are coming out soon. I hope this helped you with a little bit of information on some of the stuff that I got to see at PAX. And I hope you'll have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you all later. I went to PAX East. I can't do this with this cat here. Basket wants to say hi. I went to PAX East this year to get a look at some of the upcoming games that have